Hello and welcome to TVB News. National Security Police have arrested a man for allegedly harboring 4 riot suspects and persuading them to jump bail. One of these suspects involved is Chun Chi-kin, who was shot and wounded by the police in Chunwon in 2019. Authorities rearrested the 4 suspects early yesterday in Sai-kung. Caleb Leung has details.
The 21-year-old Zhang Chi-kin was taken to the district court today. Also in the police van was the 23-year-old Feng Chenghua and a 16-year-old teenager. All 3 were arrested in Sai-kung. Zhang is best known as one of the protesters who was shot and wounded by the police in Chunwon in 2019. He was charged with rioting on National Day that year. He also faces 2 counts of assaulting a policeman. On that day, Zhang was shot in his left chest during a scuffle with police officers. As for Feng Chenghua, he was charged in connection with his involvement in rioting in Chunwon on the same day in 2019. The 16-year-old teenager, who was not named by the court, was charged with participating in a riot in Cheongkwon-o on October 13, 2019. All 3 had jumped bail and failed to appear in court as told. The court remanded the defendants in custody and adjourned their cases until September 13th. The 4th person arrested in Sai-kung is a young man accused of participating in an unlawful assembly in 2019 and possessing dangerous drugs. He jumped bail and failed to appear in court when his trial started 2 years ago. Today he appeared in Eastern Magistracy and was remanded in custody. This afternoon, the police announced that they had arrested a 34-year-old warehouse assistant for persuading the 4 suspects to flee Hong Kong. The man allegedly asked them to pay him about $400,000 in total for his group's assistance. The 4 were arranged to stay at various locations, including 2 industrial buildings in Chunwon. The police said the warehouse assistants and his accomplices stopped paying rent and providing food for the 4 early this year. The 4 used their savings to purchase food and were arrested when they went out on Wednesday. The police believe the group that helped the 4 suspects has 10 members, and some of them are thought to have fled to the UK. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
6 of the 12 fugitives intercepted in mainland waters during their escape to Taiwan back in 2020 pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice. Some defendants say they were promised protection from Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council. Jackie Lin with more.
The case was heard at West Kowloon Magistrates Courts. All 12 fugitives except activist Andy Lee Yu-hin were charged with perverting the course of justice between November 2019 and August 2020. Andy Lee is awaiting sentencing on earlier national security-related charges. One defendant, Lee Zi-in, did not appear in court after being listed as a close contact of a COVID patient while in custody. Today, more details about their escape bid were unveiled as well. The 12 held different roles in coordination and commute arrangements, as well as in search of funding and a hideout prior to their escape to Taiwan. Before being intercepted by mainland coast guards at sea, several members of the 12 fugitives were prosecuted with charges including rioting and possession of explosives. 3 of them admitted that a middleman promised them residency and a job in Taiwan. They each paid $150,000 in fees for absconding plans and were arranged to learn how to steer a speedboat. They were asked to turn themselves in to Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council once they reached the island under the guise of a fishing trip. 2 members of the 12 fugitives, Tan Kai-yin and Queen Moon, were sentenced to 2 and 3 years behind bars on the mainland, respectively, after a Shenzhen court convicted them of organizing the illegal crossing of the border. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Hong Kong logged 3,674 new COVID-19 infections, including 257 imported cases. Health authorities, meanwhile, announced there will be a new arrangement for people who test positive for the coronavirus at Shenzhen Bay Port.
To improve and to strengthen the management of these cases will require all departing passengers to be sent to the community isolation facilities for those who are not, who have a positive quick PCR.
Furthermore, travelers are required to make their online reservation for the PCR test at the border checkpoint. The government said this new measure is aimed at shortening people's wait times for their COVID tests at the port. From tomorrow, those who fail to show their proof of reservation may be barred from crossing the border, while the authorities indicated that they will enforce more stringent measures to handle positive cases in the community. Some health experts suggested the government should consider further relaxing the border control measures. For example, instead of staying in quarantine hotels, inbound travelers can be allowed to have home isolation along with regular COVID tests. Government pandemic advisor David Hui said this arrangement can only be applied to those with a suitable living environment. For instance, they need to have their own private room and washroom at home. The government's new technology chief has said the authorities have no intention of updating the Leave Home Safe app to include real name registration and tracking functions. This marks a U-turn on a policy that had been proposed by the city's health chief a few days ago. Christy Khan reports.
Secretary for Health Lo Chung-mao had earlier announced his plan to require people to register with the Leave Home Safe app using their real names, stating it would help curb the spread of COVID in the city. However, Secretary for Innovation, Technology and Industry Sun Dong told reporters today that the app will not be updated for this purpose in the short term, in a U-turn on the Health Secretary's proposed policy. Sun added the app would already have contained users' real names if they had uploaded their vaccination records to it. Furthermore, real name registration for prepaid SIM cards will come into effect by February next year. He believes the app will naturally possess the real name registration function by then. The authorities are now aiming to add another function instead, which would enable users to show their PCR test records in the app.
Based on medical doctor suggestion, PCR test results will be very important for the infection control. But currently, our Leave Home Safe app has no any indicator about these important results. Therefore, we are working in the direction of using Leave Home Safe app to show the PCR results for identifying the confirmed case. I think this is very important, okay? It is beneficial to the community as a whole.
When asked how the proposed health code system will be enforced, given the real name registration is not required for the app, the technology chief said it is possible to obtain the records of COVID patients or people who are subject to quarantine from the government if necessary. Christy Khan, TVB News.
Overseas, Sri Lanka's President Gotabaya Rajapaksa is reported to have left the Maldives for Singapore, while in Colombo, military troops are deployed to prevent protesters taking over the parliament building. Initial reports said Rajapaksa would fly on to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, but Reuters quoted an unnamed government source as saying that he would remain in Singapore. In Colombo, soldiers were enforcing a curfew days after tens of thousands of protesters stormed the offices and residences of both the president and the prime minister. Many Sri Lankans blamed the Rajapaksa government for an economic crisis that has seen the country struggle to import basic items such as food, fuel, and medicine. Reports say protesters would voluntarily vacate the occupied premises. Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, who is now acting president, have promised to resign. The Tokyo District Court ordered 4 former executives of Tokyo Electric Power Company to pay 13 trillion yen in damages to the company over the handling of the Fukushima nuclear disaster. That amount of damages is equivalent to about $97 billion US. The ruling in the civil case brought by shareholders is the first time any court has found Tepco executives responsible for the disaster that wrecked the Fukushima Daiichi plant in 2011. It forced the evacuation of thousands of residents after a tsunami caused 3 reactors to melt down, spreading radiation far and wide. The court judged the executives could have prevented the disaster had they heeded scientific data sooner on the risk from a tsunami. The verdict is likely to have an impact on the liability lawsuit of the Japanese government and a criminal responsibility lawsuit on 3 Tepco executives, which is being appealed. Rare talks between Ukrainian and Russian officials may see a breakthrough in opening up shipping lanes in the Black Sea for grain exports, which the United Nations says is crucial for preventing a global hunger crisis. Shelling continues, meanwhile, in various cities in Ukraine, while North Korea has recognized the Donbas regions of Donetsk and Luhansk as separate republics. Nazvi Karim reports.
In the midst of war, the significance of these grain fields goes beyond the dispute between Russia and Ukraine. That's because these fields in Ukraine hold the key to preventing global hunger, especially in poor countries. Ukraine provides at least 10% of the world's grain supplies, while Russia is also a major wheat supplier. However, getting shipments to the world via the Black Sea has been stifled by blockades and a heavily mined sea route. But there may be a breakthrough. Ukrainian and Russian officials met face-to-face for the first time in months, along with Turkish and United Nations mediators in Istanbul.
In a world darkened by global crisis, today at last we have a ray of hope. A ray of hope to ease human suffering and alleviate hunger around the world. A ray of hope to support developing countries and the most vulnerable people. A ray of hope to bring a measure of much-needed stability to the global food system.
Turkey's Defense Minister Hulusi Akar said an agreement would be signed next week. Ankara will ensure safety of shipments in transit, and the parties will jointly check grain cargoes in ports. Back on the front lines, Ukraine says Russian missiles struck the city of Vinnytsia today, killing 12 people and wounding 25 more, in what Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky called an open act of terrorism. Ukraine also said Russian forces targeted a number of civilian facilities in the southern city of Mykolaiv, killing at least 5 people. While in the industrialized Donbas region of eastern Ukraine, electricity was cut in some parts of Kramatorsk after the city was hit by Russian missiles. A Russian strike destroyed a school in Donbas on Wednesday. No casualties were reported. This 11-year-old student said she wanted things to go back to normal so they can play together instead of being shelled. Russian media, meanwhile, said Ukrainian armed forces had launched a fresh missile attack on the Russian-held Kherson area in the south, which Kiev is hoping to retake. While the battles rage on in the Donbas, North Korea has given official recognition to the 2 Russian-backed breakaway People's Republics in the region, Donetsk and Luhansk, as independent states, a separatist leader and a Russian state news agency said. The Donetsk embassy in Moscow posted a photo on its Telegram channel of a ceremony in which North Korea's ambassador to Moscow, Sin Hong-chol, handed a certificate of recognition to the Donetsk envoy. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
The first runoff vote in the British Conservative Party's leadership contest was held on Wednesday. Former Chancellor of the Exchequer Rishi Sunak secured the most backing from his fellow MPs. Sunak secured 88 votes from the party's 359 lawmakers. Up second was Junior Trade Minister Penny Mordaunt with 67, followed by Foreign Secretary Liz Truss with 50. Nadeem Zahawi, who succeeded Sunak as Finance Minister last week, and former Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt were eliminated. Former Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch, Attorney General Suella Braverman, as well as the Chair of Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee, Tom Tugendhat, are also still in the race to replace Boris Johnson as Tory leader and British Prime Minister. Further rounds of voting will take place today and next week if necessary, until just 2 candidates remain. Conservative Party members will decide the winner in a postal ballot, the result of which will be announced on September 5th. Meanwhile, the outgoing Prime Minister told the House of Commons that he would leave his post with his head held high.
It's perfectly true that I leave not at a time of my choosing, and it's absolutely true. But I am proud of the fantastic teamwork that has been involved in all of those projects, both nationally and internationally, Mr. Speaker. And I'm also proud of the leadership that I have given. And I will be leaving, Mr. Speaker. I will be leaving soon with my head held high.
Back here at home, the Chinese University of Hong Kong has developed a computational method that can predict the effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines against epidemic variants with 95% accuracy. The university research team aims to use their new algorithm to help vaccine manufacturers and influence the city's anti-COVID policies. Timothy Lee has the story.
As the epidemic continues to mutate, the structure of the coronavirus is evolving along with it. Because of the continuous mutation, the original agent used by the vaccine against the virus will gradually lose its effectiveness. However, a solution for predicting vaccine efficacy has been developed by a CUHK research team.
Yeah, we can affirm this is the first platform that enables using computer and genome information to predict vaccine effectiveness for COVID-19.
Professor Maggie Wong pointed out that Hong Kong was the first place in the world to develop this computational platform. The algorithm calculates the genetic distance between the vaccine spike protein and the vaccine strain, which means a longer genetic distance between the two means the vaccine is less effective.
Using our bioinformatic platform, we can immediately estimate the vaccine effectiveness against the current, at the same time, against the circulating viruses. And that provides a very useful and informative tool to advise the manufacturers what is the optimal, that is best antigen to use for production.
The team added their new method significantly shortens the time required to determine a vaccine's efficacy to just a few hours. CUHK's computation method discovered that the current available vaccines are still 50% effective against mild cases of the common BA.4 and BA.5 mutant strains, but are only 30% effective against symptomatic or serious cases. Wong and her team believe that with a 95% accuracy rate, their algorithm can assist vaccine manufacturers with selecting the most effective antigen for production. They also wish to assist the government with its anti-COVID policies and analyze possible effects of an outbreak caused by the mutant strains. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
That is the news. Thanks for watching. Good night.